athlete battles, joccupation, transitional story. LaVonne.
Hi, I'm LaVonne Idlette, and I was a track and field athlete. The highest level I competed at was the Olympic Games 2012. I started playing sports at a very, very young age. Around 18 months, I started gymnastics, but I didn't start running track until high school. How my career ended was I just started being like very mediocre. Like I was trying hard, but like what I realized was I wasn't giving my all into the training anymore, which meant it was over. And so what it was like for me, it was kind of, that part of my life felt weird because although I was going through the motions, like going to practice every day, eating healthier than most people. I was not running nearly as fast. I just wasn't performing well. And it felt like, wow, I must suck versus like, look at what you're doing and the level of commitment that you have. And so what I realized was it was time for it to be over. And I started putting my energy into other things. The lowest moment I had in my transition was I thought I was really smart. So during my career, I was also an MBA student, a law student, because I kind of just took that student athlete thing way too seriously and just kept it going forever. And so I thought I was very smart. And so I partnered with a lady and we started a day spa on Fort Lauderdale Beach, and she ends up stealing a lot of the money and it ends up closing down. So it was a very low moment for me because I felt like I was smarter than the average jock, and that things like that couldn't happen to me. And so how I got through it was I just let it go. I just had to say, okay, I mean, I lost some money, I lost some confidence in the moment, but once I let it go and focused on other things, I was able to bounce back. My highest moment so far in my post-athletic career has been realizing that my purpose is to help others. And so I get a lot more joy from that than the actual successes that I have in business. So I saw the eyes of one of my client athletes light up as he received his first check from owning a piece of property and he's just like, whoa, I didn't even do anything. And I'm like, and then it clicked to him and he said, wow, I don't have to play anymore if I don't want to, which is like the pivotal moment for me where I'm like, this is what I've been trying to say the whole time. You have the power to do whatever you want to do. And you can do it well. It just takes some planning and some thought. And so the backstory of how I got to that point is, most people did know that I was an MBA student and that I was a law student. So I had a lot of athlete friends coming to me asking me for advice or whatever the case may be. And I was investing in stuff with my father. And so I have a very strong background in real estate. So I had people coming to me, but I wasn't doing it in an organized way. And so that, like, the start of that is just like, this could be a business. And then turning it into a business over time is just like throw some things at the wall, see what sticks, see what I actually enjoy doing, and then like cutting out some of the things I didn't enjoy doing. And so what I'm doing now is I run a more or less a parent company of a vertically integrated consortium of real estate companies. So we broker, we do the mortgages, we consult, develop, construct, and we offer nonprofit services for our affordable housing. And I also teach professional athletes and advise professional athletes on how to purchase real estate that is revenue generating. And my advice that I would give to anybody who's transitioning out of sports is to give yourself grace, because we are very resilient people. We are very dedicated. We're diligent to anything that we know, and we have confidence that we know. So a point about transition is to give yourself grace to figure it out. You're going to figure it out because that's just how you're wired. But don't be so hard on yourself to think that you have to be perfect for it to work, because it doesn't.
What was it about playing sports? What was it about? It's not the practice, it's not running the sprints, but what was it about the regiment that you can pull over into what you're doing? Because investment and sports, I mean, they're train tracks, right? They're so parallel because you put something in, but you're really betting on the future, but you're betting on the future based on process. So it's not as blind as people might think it is, but you are betting though, but it's a calculated bet. So what can you articulate or connect the dots between training for the 110 hurdles versus appraising this plot of land to say this is worth me investing in?
Okay, so basically the process of being an athlete is doing something consistently with a spot on a vision. And so that consistency is like putting money in the bank. Every day you put a little money in the bank, and then eventually you'll have that vision of whatever it is that you're trying to do. So the process of investing is having a checklist of things that you do consistently every single day. And that comes down, for me, that comes down to, I look at different properties every day, and then I take those properties through the same regimen. So I'm comparing apples to apples, meaning I want to know what's the zoning, what can I do with the property, what's the income, what's the path of progress for the area, just all these intangible and tangible things that go into a property. So I streamline a list so that I don't skip steps. So I have a list of what I look for that makes it a good deal. Then I have a list for what to look for once you're under contract and going through that due diligence process, and then what you do once you take the property over. And so that's literally the same as in sports when you're like, here's my preseason, here's my in season, and here's what I do once we're already in it. And so and then you have a championship season, which I would call that more like going towards your exit strategy. And so that's where you really make the most money, which is like exiting out of whatever the business is. But you get the consistency of it in that middle piece. And if you do that middle piece really well, you'll be satisfied.
So let me ask you this. What is money for? What is money?
So money is just a tool, really, that helps people execute ideas and ideals. So from a very high level in finance, I started to realize that money wasn't as real and tangible as we make it. Like, I do more deals on paper. I don't touch cash. I probably haven't touched cash in years, beyond like someone giving you $1 or so. But transactions happen on paper based on value. So then once you start to realize that, you're like, wait a minute, my view of money was wrong this entire time.
How do you think most people view money? Especially because you said you have a clientele, right, of athletes. Because I have two girls, and my oldest I give an allowance to, but she works, and my youngest, she lost her first tooth, so she got the tooth fairy. So she's like, I got some money now, right? She got $1, but obviously she has no concept of it. I asked my youngest, what do you get the $1? Well, to go get something. I said, okay, what else could you use the $1 for? So it's strange. And again, given my own background, I understand the resources of the utility of money.
Right.
But when people come from where you come from, not you specific, but I'm just saying in general, right? Holistically, most athletes, socially, economically speaking, come from distressed conditions.
Right.
The conditions in which you live develops a culture in order to survive. The culture is based upon certain premises, values, and priorities.
Right.
Therefore, money, most times, I assume, is looked at as an ends versus a means.
Yes.
So how do or is it possible to switch that mindset of saying, I'm getting money versus what can I do with money?
So that transition just comes down to the first thought of what you do when you get money. So there is always I receive money and now I can spend it on a thing. Then there's I receive money, how can I make this money make more money? Those are two chains of thought.
What's the dividing line? What's the line of demarcation? What separates those two people can sit in the same room? What separates them?
Knowing what to do to make money.
And where does that, is that something, because we think of athletics.
Right.
Look, you can go to NBA camp until you're 40. You ain't gonna play. You're 5'6". That's just the way it's gonna be, right? So how much is natural ability versus how much can an individual actually acquire? When you think of like finance, because they think of like credit default swaps or all the big 3-syllable words that say, you know, I made one big pile into 2 small piles. That's all you're saying. You make it sound exotic. So to kind of demystify,
right,
is a lot of, so if an athlete uses their same approach to training as they did to financial literacy, could they find the same success?
You would find more success because it's you start from a higher level, a higher plane. Meaning,
yeah, what do you mean?
So everybody in this very moment is always looking for some kind of a get rich quick scheme, right? So let's say you're not starting from zero. Once you're not starting from zero, you're already in the game. Okay. And it's just knowing how to maneuver your position, because the one thing that helps you with like leveraging who you are and your capital is not needing money. Number one. So people want to do business with people who are peer. And the easier that you make yourself appear to be a peer, which is easy because let's say for you, for example, you went to Vanderbilt. Anybody who is a Vanderbilt booster who does business that is in the Vanderbilt alumni chain, if you said, hey, this is what I'm doing, I'd like some information from you, they would be way more willing to have a conversation. And then you're going to say, this is what my value is. I know how to do these things and I know these people. I'd like to be a partner with you. The likelihood that they would say no to that, if it actually is something in their value chain that they actually need, is zero. They would literally be like, okay, so now you've created money without spending money, without using the money, even though it's all there. And so that's the swap in how you think about interacting with people is one of those like, it's transitional thought of how money actually works. When I deal with people from a lower socioeconomical background, they think I have to do everything alone. I have to pay. I have to like it's always money is used as the actual value being exchanged versus who you are, what you do, who you know, and all the other intangible values that you actually can bring into transactions and business and whatever the case may be.
Is there a class? So now I think to high school, especially college, but starting at high school, is there something that a kid in high school can start doing to set at least a knowledge base, to at least understand the conversation, right? When you're watching the news, be able to decode the messages that they're sending, one. And then second, going to college, is there, or would you recommend a degree or a field of study to either go to or stay away from that can also help those that are more economically minded or financially minded?
So my one suggestion that I have is specifically for college. We'll come back to high school. Specifically for colleges, have an advisor of your team go to the School of Business and create you an independent study. And that independent study so let's say you are a football player, for example. Now, this independent study is going to take place one-on-one with a professor. You're going to get them to choose who they think the best professor is to teach you financial literacy, understanding economics, understanding business fundamentals. And so this is going to be a 3-hour course. You're going to do a one-on-one, and they're going to make sure you get it. The one thing we underutilize in college is independent studies.
Oh, no, absolutely. Because I don't even think I did it. I did an internship, independent study. But it's funny you say that because growing up, dad's a Marine, mom was a nurse, mom's from New York, dad's from Mobile, Alabama. I mean, it was work. You'll get your black ass out there and you're going to work because you don't learn how to work. And so it does get ingrained because you got to have the foundation, right?
Exactly.
Of toughness. Because like with raising kids, love them to death, but the only way you get tough is to go through it. Yeah. There's no shortcut to it. But when you go through it, that's what makes you strong. And that's where your compassion lies. So what I'm thinking of, as people grow older, we get certain things stuck in our heads, especially fiscally speaking. Mm-hmm. I don't say at what point, but what advice would you give, or where is somewhere somebody could seek, I don't want to say contradictory information, but just information that would challenge your upbringing? For instance, like I read, what is it called? The Wealth of Nations, right? And it's like the first couple of chapters where they just talk about value. Mm-hmm. That to me, and we're talking about something from the 1700s. Like this is the playbook for American capitalism, is the value of money by, I think it's John Smith. But anyway, the economics of it, right? But then you have to tie in Hobbes and just the how people are, right? Human nature on top of supply and demand, and that's where the marriage happens. But the overarching theme is value. You can be as racist as you want to be. I get it.
Right.
But a racist ain't going to be poor. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand, or they don't want to believe that. It's your hatred is at a point, because at the point you start to hurt yourself, you won't do that because of self-preservation, right? And that's value. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about value, how can people, or where can people go to learn more about what does value mean?
So my biggest advice to people, kids, all the time is always, so value is such an ambiguous term that I say, how do you create the most value of yourself? And it's to look at the way that you become a great athlete. This is the same way that you did that. You do that in a field of study. Now, what field of study that will be depends more about you personally, and you have to kind of dig a little deep to get there. I'd say try things out, but once you kind of figure it out, what you have to do is dig below the surface, below the subsurface, and get really deep knowledge. That deep knowledge makes you very valuable. So the person who can code, they're cool. The person who can change algorithms is well sought after. So it's like are you a good football player? Yes. And then, okay, are you good in different schemes? Now you're valuable.
Right. It's like being able to play corner, safety, or being able to be a tight end, a wide receiver. It's the more you can do, but I think most people don't realize this is all a game. Like life, this thing is a game. And being an athlete, we invested so much of ourselves towards our goals. And then when we accomplish them, it's almost like the smoke kind of goes away. And then you kind of start seeing like you go to Disney World and look behind it's a Wonderful Life, and you look behind the scenes and you're like, this is terrible. This is back here, right? And I think there's the disillusionment. I know for myself, the disillusionment that happens where we're built to have integrity, right? You're built to have, or you're raised to have integrity. You're raised to have standards and to have this almost all-American view of the world. Mm-hmm. And then once you get resources and access, you start realizing everybody's not playing the same game here. And it's not racial. This is economics.
Right.
So as you start moving socioeconomically through the different stages of life, we understand every level has its own culture that protects. And that's how, and I think when we talk about athletes, we don't understand the cultural side of the socioeconomics. Simply put, it's like the way you carry yourself. Right. The words you choose to use, right? The facial expressions, all these other things that can be taught. Just like they teach you, look, put your hands down, the 2.5 feet back for your back leg and 1/2 foot for your front. You get all those technical things and it's just memorization.
Right.
When we're talking about the cultural side, almost the supernatural side of that, it's one thing to fit in or try to fit in, but I think most of the pain comes internally because we've got to admit what we were told wasn't true.
Right.
And then that creates that divide, because now when my value changes, because that premise isn't true anymore, I'm not saying society's holding me back or not. I know for myself personally, my history may be a victim. I sure as hell am not one, right? But that's my own mentality. So for those that almost have to emancipate themselves, because this is what happens with success.
Right.
How does one stay not centered, but how do you say, how can an athlete feel safe as they're changing?
So I've had a lot of conversations kind of around the same subject, because you don't know what you don't know. And then feeling safe and comfortable in the change, but allowing yourself to realize that change doesn't have to be inauthentic. And that growing is a part of your life. And so a lot of times, because we're surrounded by the people that you love and you grew up with, and they've taught you a certain thing or whatever the case may be, they expect you to wear that mask of your tribe forever. Now, like, yes, this is who you are, mask. And when you try to, and it's not even assimilate, it's like literally you learn better and now you do things differently. You will always have the pulls of the external world of both sides. You're like, oh, I met new people. I like them. They're cool. And then I still like these people. These people are still cool. And that can coexist while you help educate the people from where you're from that like this, there's more to the world than this. I happen to grow up in like the center of both. Meaning my grandfather's an entrepreneur. He went to college for a little while, went to the military. And when I was growing up, his number one thing is pay yourself first, 10%. If you're not paying yourself first, which means you're putting it away to invest or whatever the case may be, you're working for someone else for real. So you don't live to pay bills, you live to grow for yourself and your family. But most people don't have that. So it's been like life mission for me to be the stand-in face that says, how can I expose more people to more information faster? Because the conversations that I have, most people who are from a wealthy background, this stuff they talk about all the time. And then they'll hear me talk about it and say,
how did you know?
You know this.
Right.
Because I'm like, I started a dynasty trust for my family from Wyoming. And they're like, how do you know about this?
Right.
And I'm like, well, for me, I am a person who goes into rabbit holes, which means if you spark a thought for me, I'm digging deeper and deeper and deeper until I find the answer. That's an athlete's mindset, though. You're going to say, hey, I have a hamstring issue. You're going to look up every article you can until you figure out how to make that hamstring stop hurting. If you do that to everything, you'll be successful at anything.
So when that person, does the athlete, forget the athlete, does the person who goes through this evolution have an obligation to anybody else?
So I live on two theorems of thought on that. One, we as a minority community grew up, our parents grew up, because I'm not going to say we grew up this way, but our parents grew up in a community that needed each other, which means that they were very supportive of each other, and they were there for, like, your neighbor might whoop your kids, like literally.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Like, we're there for each other because without each other, we can't survive. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, that creates a responsibility for others, but also an entitlement. So I do not actually believe that your success becomes a requirement for you to give back. I think that you should, but that is within a moral and ethical code that you have to live within yourself. And I don't charge people up for saying I don't have the time, the capacity, or the desire to give back or to share what I know. Because some people, although they've reached the pinnacle or they've learned something, they've not quite learned that there is abundance in the world. So they sometimes believe like it can only be one and it's going to be me, versus, which I really applaud now younger NFL guys for sure, is that they started to train together. They play the same position. They train together at really high level camps together around here. Before, you would never see that. If you're a superstar, you train in your own group. Superstars don't train with other superstars because they're like, I don't want him to know the little thing that I know so that when I go back to camp, he'll be able to take my spot. But then they started to realize, which we all have to realize as people, is iron sharpens iron. I don't want to be around weak people. I want to be around people who hold each other accountable, who's going to be great. And then anytime they see me messing up, they like, nah, you messing up. And if you're a person that hangs out with other people, you then become responsible for those people to say, okay, if I know that you could do this better and I don't tell you, I'm not really your friend. So I don't think that there's a general obligation to strangers, but to people that you allegedly care about. If you are around them enough and you know that you know something that can help them, or even in conversation, and I talk about this quite often, my success, a lot of it post athletics has come from, I have a lot of people sponsoring me. And I use that term, like quote unquote sponsoring me, meaning I don't have to be in the room. And somebody will say, I know somebody that can do that. Oh, I know a perfect person that can, for that. And they're always speaking on my behalf when I'm not in the room. So it is an obligation for me to give opportunities to people who I know deserve it, who are not in that room.
So what is it that playing sports, not even playing, participating, preparing to play, what is it, what did that teach you that unless you experienced it, you wouldn't know?
Ooh. So one is that most things in isolation feel perfect. So my first 2 years of my career, I worked out by myself. All my workouts felt great. I was great, boom, perfect. But then I would go to races and I would be up and down. Then I started training in a group with really good people. And it's a humbling experience to get your ass whooped every day. Like, it just is. And have to fight just to be in the mix of a workout. But what that does, though, it really drags you through it, so you get stronger, and that confidence builds. So I think that it's important to like realize in isolation, things are perfect. It's just, I used that last year's Kaepernick tryout thing as a perfect example. I'm like, there isn't a quarterback that has ever played in the NFL that cannot hit targets with nobody in front of him.
Right.
See
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think that was more just dog and pony show. Just to check the box and say, we did it. Let me ask you this. What's the difference between confidence and arrogance?
Ooh, So I think that we've over humbleized some people, overused the word humble to make confidence seem like arrogance a lot of the time. But the difference between confidence and arrogance is the need to tell others. So.
Oh, okay. Oh, my answer to that was always the difference between arrogance and confidence is being able to take advice.
I like that too.
Arrogant people don't take advice, but go ahead. I like doing it.
I agree with yours as well, because I just feel like when I'm confident in something and I'm doing it very well, I don't have to tell you I can cook. If I cook, put it on a plate and give it to you.
Nobody's got to tell you it's raining. It's raining.
Exactly.
I got to tell you, you don't have to believe it. Look, yeah.
Exactly. So arrogance is you can't even be in a room without somebody knowing something about you, something that you've done, like you just can't. That's arrogance to me. Okay.
What's the difference between success and winning?
So success is relative to your goal. Winning is more subjective. So winning would be, I get first place in a race, right? So that's subjective. It's not objective at all. Success is objective because it only has to do with me, my goals, what I intend, what my vision is. You know, you can be successful to yourself and it may not look like success to someone else.
So along those lines, I'm trying to think of how because we always talk about we want to win, right? They all want to win the game. They want to win the game, right? Or we lost the game.
Right.
But like you were saying, getting deeper, right? The difference between winning and losing and success and failure. Because I've seen a lot of guys that win financially because you're drafted and you're X, Y, and Z, but a failure because your life, like your day in, day out life was actually worse than before this ever happened.
Yes.
And then I think of guys that go through colleges, and I'm not even saying a Vanderbilt, I'm saying like a Princeton, a Colgate, a Dartmouth, William and Mary, right? At least Vandy games, people will watch them on the SEC network, right? People listen to Princeton games on the radio still, right? Nobody's watching that. No disrespect to them, but we understand the ecosystem of sports. They train just as hard.
Yes.
But they don't get the success of what they're doing. So although they might not win per se with a national championship or a ring,
right,
later on in life, when you look at the Rolodexes of CEOs, all the overwhelming majority have sports in their background.
Right.
So there's where that thing says, okay, and is that a value system? Success, failure, winning, losing.
Yes. So I would say that in general, the person working the hardest, if you watch this is my track and field analysis. If you're watching a race, the person who looks like they're working the hardest is usually in the back. Because it's more to it than the hard work. It's a finesse. It's a, but at the same time, just like you said, I have a lot of friends that played football. I have a lot of friends in the venture private equity space that played football in college at Ivy League schools with no aspirations or no real chances of playing professional football. But we all, as athletic people who participate in organized sports, gain a lot from it. But because their perspective on what they intended to be, their win out of sports is more of an intangible. Like they gained some friendships, they gained a conversation to have while they go to a meeting with another person who also plays sports. They gained, so it's the intangibles, I think, across sports in general that creates wins, but also they're like, the real reason I don't like sports commentators, like I literally do not like them at all, because I think that they spend too much time trying to find a reason to tear people down. So they're all about losses and failures. Like, look how terrible this person looks, or they suck now, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that we as athletes start to internalize that and take that as a value piece. And I loved what I saw that Tyler Perry said about himself and critics, was that he knows the audience in which he serves, so he doesn't worry about who doesn't like him or who isn't his fan or who doesn't want to see him be successful. And I think that athletes, when they find that,